Hi, my name's Martin Smith, and I'm here to talk to you about what an electron actually looks like and how it's made up. I'm going to start with the different ideas from different parts of physics. We have high energy particle physics, which sees an electron as a single point. It sees it as an object that can't be broken up into constituent parts, and it can be used as a hammer, as in it uses high energy electrons. That's electrons at very high speed. Okay, from there we have YouTube video channels, and through these channels we're mostly talking about real scientists that are looking at possibilities and taking their possibilities and seeing how far those possibilities will go. Most of these are real scientists that if you look at being written up in journals, journals are called peer review. So they're looking at things that are fact. Peer review is looking for factual things, not possibilities. They don't care about possibilities. So there's a lot of things that you will not find in journals, and there are things you will find in journals that shouldn't be there. Ideas such as if you look at journals for piping, plumbing, water and sewer, you'll see how they advocate toilet to tap. They're saying their water's cleaner than, or coming out of the sewer than what you get out of the creek for drinking water, and they should be able to take your toilet water, process it, and pump it back to you to drink it, for you to drink it. So there's a lot of things about journals that I very much disagree with. And luckily YouTube allows us to explore other things. So going back to it, we have quasi-cycle video and energy wave theory. These are two separate YouTube channels, and what they're looking at is they're also looking at an electron as a single point, but they're looking at that electron going around a circle twice, revolving in a circle twice, a single charge, and that would be one wavelength. The particle guru and dissident science, particle guru would be the father, dissident science would be the son. And these are my views of how they're presenting or how they're perceiving the electron. So I do advise you looking at these channels if you're interested in what an electron looks like. They are probably one of the best channels you can be looking at. What particle gurus basically starts out saying is they're looking at the photon and how it divides up, or I believe this is true. Disclaimer right here. It's difficult for me to grasp the ideas because they're very foreign to me. So my perspective is that they're looking at how a photon separates into an electron and a positron. They're grouping all that together, and they're calling that a G1 particle, saying gravity 1 particle. They also have a G2 particle, saying that gravity has two separate entities to it, or that's what I believe they're saying. Like I say, I have a hard time following that method because it is completely foreign to my line of thinking. The fourth way would be the mathematical way to do it. The YouTube channel Dissenti, pronunciation is beyond me, but he started out coming at it from a electromechanical point of view, pretty much from the math, and started looking at electron as a mathematical equation. And doing that, the electron has spin, it has frequency, and therefore it has a diameter, and a diameter has 2 points. The YouTube channel Fractal Woman takes that a little bit farther with mathematics, and they're looking at the velocity of the outside of an electron traveling at the speed of light, and with a radius and a diameter, or actually the circumference of it, giving you a radius of the electron. So with that diameter, they're using a distance and they're making 2 points out of it. We'll see if they go a different route later on, but they are looking at it from a mathematical point of view. I am looking at an electron because I am chasing after gravity, and there's 2 ways to chase after it. One is to look at vortex waves, as in the field of luminiferous ether. And one of the models of the vortex wave was the double helix photon theory. And I'm taking that theory and pretty much saying that if you have a positive and negative charge traveling in a helix, going in a straight line, that's each charge would be a vortex wave. And you put those into a high energy magnetic field, whether you're putting it through a proton electron field or a high energy magnetic field made from electric coils. Either way will produce, can split a high energy photon into a electron and a positron. So I'm looking at it from that point of view where they split. If you were to take 2 of the electric fields and 2 of the positive fields and have them go in opposite direction, you would find that if you're dealing with electric, you're dealing with the left-hand rule. So the thumbs is the direction of the travel, the curl of the fingers is the direction of the spin. So you have one traveling this way and you have one traveling this way. And so long as the 2 are coming together, the 2 fields, where they touch are coming together. Let's see here. I'm going to use this pin here to take my thumb of my right hand, and I'm going to reverse my thumb direction with the pin. That big coil of one of the vortexes. So now this becomes an electron, and I take this coil. We have 2 vortex waves traveling in this direction, with the center of the vortex waves being the measured diameter of the photon. Now from here you'll notice that all vortex waves, anytime you have 2 vortex waves and the direction of the outside of the vortex waves touch and they're going in the same direction, they pull each other towards themselves. So at this point, for an electron, it's a stable unit. So you take all the energy out of it and it's stationary. You add energy to it and it is transverse, or it is in motion. The other possibility of an electron is if you push high energy and keep it stable, that eventually it gains into the next vibrational state, which is that of the proton, which is a higher energy vibrational state. And there's a top limit for that, and haven't figured out the why of it, but I'm working on it. Or a possible why of it, I should say. Big disclaimer. Going back to that, so if you have a positron, that being you take the left hand, put a pin on it to reverse that to make it a positive charge vortex wave. Take the right hand, make another positive charge vortex wave, and now we have the opposite, which is this is an unstable unit because its direction of field and its frequency are unstable in the or would be unstable in the longitudinal waves that are formed in luminiferous ether by the protons and electrons as they interact. So you have standing waves of 2 electric particles, 2 negative charged particles going in a circle, and we have large quantities of that. So these standing waves would create interference to anything that doesn't fall within that wavefront with those charges. Now we have that going around a positive charge that has a high energy, and it has a standing wave that doesn't interfere with the electron standing wave. So here we have matter, antimatter. We're dealing with matter here with electron and proton, versus antimatter, which is an antiproton or antimatter, and a positron, which would have its own version of standing wave. So whichever one becomes dominant automatically forces the other one out. So anytime you have the electron-positron split, that positron is going to be looking to gain energy until it can fit into the vibrational constraints produced by other protons around it. This is where I see protons coming from. Now you can have high energy photons going through electromagnetic field. If it's high enough, it'll create a proton and an antiproton. But the question is where do those things go to? How does an antiproton or antimatter get back down to either change into a proton or change into an electron? Now, if you add enough energy to a system, one of the Feynman diagrams, you will see where an electron goes in, a photon hits it at an angle, super high energy photon, and a positron comes back out. There is a possibility that if you take a standing wave, because when I say a standing wave, if you look at vortex waves on the Earth, they're up against the Earth. They have a barrier against it. If we're looking at vortex waves in space, then that standing wave is up against a shock wave, and it's called the barrier of the speed of light. So that's as far as that standing wave can go, and it's pushing up against it. So I'm getting off track of the singularity or singularity vortex model of an electron, and it's time to put it on paper. Okay, under the singularity model, we have a photon having two charges, one as minus, which would be the left hand, the thumb pointing in the direction of travel, the fingers curling in the direction of spin, and a positive charge, which would be the right hand, which the thumb pointing in the direction of travel and spin. So you have two singularity vortexes moving in this direction and spinning. So the energy necessary to keep them together is not that great, because the spin of the helix, double helix of the double helix photon model that comes from this is very small. So it takes very small energies to hold these things together for long durations or long distances. So electron and positron are not that way. As soon as you take, let's see here, I need to do an electron, I take my right hand, put my thumb in, make this my thumb going the other direction, and I take my left hand going this way, so that the spins when they touch are going the same way, and then they'd be traveling in a circle this direction. So on this model, as you can see, so in this model, what's happening is the spins have a lot of force pulling apart, so they have to have a higher energy of the vortexes so that the vortexes will hold themselves together. And the lowest energy of that capability is where an electron becomes stable, as in, as in that is the smallest amount of energy that the electron can give up. So they are stable within itself. It can't give up any more energy, but it can acquire more energy, both in rest or in velocity. A proton is pretty much a positron, but with higher energy. Antimatter is the opposite of a proton. So the proton electron can be made both by a high energy photon going through atoms where it's going through a high magnetic field, or a photon, high energy photon going through an electromagnetic field all by itself. It does not have to go through atoms to be split apart. That is the same with the proton antimatter particles, where they can also be split that way. And this later on I'll go over how a neutron takes on 4 of those. So a photon diameter is wavelength times, and this is diameter, not radius, so I'm not looking at amplitude of a photon, I'm looking at the diameter of a photon. So it's 5 times 10 to the minus 10 times the wavelength would equal the photon diameter. Now we flip that around for the electron, and what we have to remember is that with the photon we have the whole vortex wave, and it's not being compressed. As soon as you get this thing and, well, reverse it, as soon as you reverse that thing, what's happening is it's being compressed into a circle, and you're not going to get the same thing. So I'm assuming that there's going to be a different rate of diameter due to that factor. And we need to go over what a swag is. A swag is a scientific wild-ass guess. That means I've put this thing up against so many things and it has not failed. So I'm going from a wild-ass guess to a scientific wild-ass guess. Maybe one day I'll put it up to a postulate. Who knows? Okay, going up to another scientific wild-ass guess. A photon of energy and 1.01 MeVs to 1.88 gigaeVs can go through a pair production by passing through atoms or through a magnetic field of, and the magnetic field has to be greater than 10 to the 12th Gauss, producing 1 electron and 1 positron, or 1 proton and 1 antimatter. So the form looks like this. We have 1 double helix photon, and I am using the double helix photon model, which might also not be true, so I'm building a scientific wild-ass guess on top of another scientific wild-ass guess. So when I say in other videos, take what I'm doing with a grain of salt, believe me, we're looking at ideas and possibilities. We're not looking at facts. And there's a difference between the two. So we split this one off. It grabs a singularity, a low energy singularity traveling the other direction, and as soon as it does, the energy from this half of the photon, or this singularity aspect of the photon, directly transfers over to here, and they average out almost immediately, creating a positron, since this was the positive part of the photon. This being the negative part of the photon, it has enough energy when it hits, or when it comes across another singularity going in the opposite direction of very low energy. It also reacts, strips down the energy off the high energy negative singularity, adds it to the, or balances out with the other negative singularity, creating 2 equal power, equal energy singularities known as an electron. And here we have the magnetic field of 10 times 12 Gauss, rather than using the particle model where we're sending light through a real thin film of atoms. So when we look at an electron at rest, what we're looking at, if we look at a cross section of this donut with no hole, so if we look at a cross section of it, we have a negative singularity going into the page with the spin in this direction, a negative singularity coming out of the page with the spin going in that direction. So pulling a different model for electron, what we're looking at is an electron going into the page this direction here, spinning this direction. So we have two vortexes spinning around each other, and they spin at really high speeds. They have a frequency spin, and the diameter of the photon would be the center of this vortex against the center of this vortex, and it would create an electron diameter. When you look at vortex waves, the force isn't the direction of the inside force, it's the direction of the outside force that pushes against it. As it spins in this direction, the outside forces, these arrows here coming up, would be forcing this thing downwards. So it would be the direction, you'd be moving in the direction of the arrow here rather than the force being pushed. So we have upspin and downspin. Okay, time to stop using a paintbrush and start using an ink pen. When we get to the mass, we're going with the gravitation of a black hole, or the radius of a black hole. And that's the equation I'm using here to get the radius of where the mass would be in an electron. So when we have a photon, they're moving in the same direction. And here we're talking about momentum. That says that a photon, it takes energy to change its direction, but it does not necessarily mean that gravitation has any effect on it. And we can say the same thing about an electron too, because the electric charge is so strong. So we got the mass of an electron through its resistance to motion, not through its effects of gravitational forces. Okay, this is, so far I've gone over the electron at rest, but what does an electron look like when it's moving, when it is in motion? And this is one I have been stumped on for a long time. There's three different possibilities. The first possibility is we have an electron with two vortexes, one going this way, one going this way, and it's moving and spinning in this direction. In which case, in this direction only. In which case, as it goes faster and the energy becomes stronger, the electron becomes smaller, bigger and smaller, according to its energy state. And you have compression and contraction in that way also. The other possibility is that as an electron spins this direction, it's moving like a frisbee. And in which case, as it's going this, because each one of these center points is traveling at the speed of light by itself. So in order for this side here to be traveling at the speed of light, and this side to be traveling at the speed of light, this part here goes a lower distance than this one. And in order for it to do that, it would have to triangulate. So what's happening is it comes up this direction and immediately turns into a triangle and then comes back, because the distance from here to here, from here, has to equal to some degree the distance in its direction of travel. So it has to make up distance. So what I'm looking at in that idea is it's either going to triangulate or pear shape, depending on how you perceive it. To me, I'm saying if you make a circle more like a triangle, it inverts more like a pear or an egg shape. If it's moving at the speed of light in the same direction it's traveling, then this part here is virtually stationary compared to its travel, or it becomes more and more stationary to its center point of travel. Third version of that is that it can travel this direction, it can travel at a, how to do this just for the camera to see it, at a 45-degree angle or any angle in between, and in any direction in which both these scenarios would be true, and they would change continuously depending on its direction, momentum. So with the left hand and the forces pushing down, this would be spin down model, it would be traveling traveling in this direction, it would have a pear shape this way. If I flip it over so that the spin travels in the other direction, and this would put the outside arrows this way, so it would be spin up, so that the inside arrow would be the direction of the electrons, or direction of the electron, and the outside arrows would be the force going in the other direction. Then we'd have the spin up force, and these are measurable forces. I just don't quite have the numbers for them. If it's traveling in this direction, then as we do that, I'm going to go up here to the left-hand thumb up rule, or force upwards rule, and it would pear shape the other way. The other aspect to it, as the energy increases, the internal volume gets smaller, and this space, or the length also of the electron, would also contract. And we have a standard Lorentz formula for that, and even Einstein used that Lorentz formula for his equations, and they seem to give a real good estimate. Okay, so as an electron is spinning around a proton, and we have an acceleration velocity force applied to it, so it would be an upward force, the electron would actually change orientation so that it's always pointing in that direction. And that is for the Frisbee model. So there's different models of motion of the electron, at least different models that I've been able to come up with. So I'm not presenting just one model here. The outsides would be pushing up, and the inside would point to the direction, so this would be the spin up. This one on the other side, we'd have one going in the other direction, that would be spin down, and we would have a spin up, spin down electron going around a proton. And that's how I perceive that model happening. This pretty much ends the ideas that I have for electrons at this moment, and I will carry on with other things on the next video. And do remember again, the difference between science exploration and science facts is that exploration deals with ideas in physics, and these are ideas that I haven't been able to prove wrong to myself, so I'm putting them on video. They probably are wrong, and that's why we call it exploration. Facts are different. Facts are supposed to be things that you learn to have foundations to learn other things. This is, again, exploration of physics. We are going beyond what people consider to be facts. So take everything here that you've learned with a grain of salt, and have a nice day.